Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and Blizzard has added a lot of quality of life updates for our alts as well as main characters in patch 9.1.5, usually to help our characters catch up to our mains, get gear a little bit faster, catch up on renown, and also massive improvements to legendaries. So far in patch 9.1.5, Blizzard has added a lot of updates to make acquiring legendaries easier, less time getting when it comes to getting the currency, less punishment for crafting the wrong legendaries, and actually giving players opportunity to experiment with different playstyles, which is going to be fantastic if you're one of those creative types that really wants to try something a bit off meta. So I want to take a look at these cumulative updates and give my honest feedback on it, where Blizzard did right and where they do fall short. Also, majority of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed. You watch these videos anyway, so you might as well hit subscribe, hit the bell, especially if you want to be kept up with all the 9.1.5 updates. But anyway, let's get into today's video. Starting off with some of the bigger updates that a lot of alts are going to love, and that is legendary recycling. They should have added this in patch 9.1 because this system by itself is really good. The Rune Carver in patch 9.1.5 will offer you the opportunity to not only craft a legendary or upgrade a legendary, but now they'll even let you scrap it, where when you scrap a legendary, you'll actually be able to get the currency you used in order to craft it, the Soul Ash as well as the Soul Cinders. This was sorely needed in the last patch. When Blizzard made class tunings in patch 9.1, this altered quite a few classes in terms of what is your best legendary, so players had to recraft it. Sometimes they had to recraft it because the secondary stats needed to be changed, and maybe you need a ring with haste verse instead of crit mastery now. Other times, players had to craft completely new legendaries because their classes and covenants have changed enough where they needed some of the new covenant legendaries, or their classes are playing a completely different build and the current legendary they have right now is no longer the best, and they want to make sure they're playing at their top game. And also what felt so bad about this is the currency inside of Torghast. It is limited. You get a certain amount once a week. You get a certain amount of Soul Ash and a certain amount of Cinders. And if you just needed to change one part of your legendary or to recraft a new one, that meant you need to dive back into Torghast and keep running it over and over and over for weeks to come, recrafting your legendary altogether. This change opens up so many doors for Blizzard going forward, especially when it comes to tuning. If you are sitting around and you feel like the current meta is about the same and you want for the meta to change, you want for some of the classes that are weaker to get a little stronger, and for maybe the classes that have been strong for weeks and weeks to potentially be toned down a bit. You want things to be adjusted for PvE or PvP, but Blizzard can't just go and changing classes constantly because that could have ripple effects. The legendaries, they know the players have been farming the currency inside of Torghast and they get a limited amount of it every single week, and if they make a meta change, all of a sudden your best slot legendary changes and now you have to go back to Torghast even though you thought you were done and finished. With this change, I feel like they can go and do a lot more class tuning and class balancing, trying to adjust the meta midway through the patch with some crazy big swings because players can now at least get some of that currency back. What you don't get back when you recraft your legendaries are the missives, which are the scrolls that provide the secondary stats for your legendaries, which are generally not too expensive in the auction house, as well as the item used to imbue with that legendary power. The prices for these legendaries has been going down on many servers over time though, and even buying rank 5 or rank 6 legendary is a lot more affordable than ever before, ever since they added a way for players to be able to convert different resources like anima, which is plentiful in Korthia, and transform it into a legendary material item that is used to craft these legendaries. More mats in the auction house means more people can craft these legendaries. More players put the legendary in the auction house, then they have to compete against each other, so the prices go down. Prices go down means they become more affordable and more players can afford that item. This is huge because this opens up opportunity for players to experiment, to try different builds. Have you ever thought of trying a different legendary, a different playstyle, something that could potentially be fun? Maybe you want to switch to a different covenant, which will be easier in 9.1.5, and craft that covenant legendary. See how it works. Does it work well in PvP? Does it work well in dungeons or raids? And if the answer is no, you can always take it back and refund the currency it took for you to craft it, which is much better than crafting a legendary, finding out that it's really bad, and now you're just stuck with it and there's nothing you can do about it. We also have a bit of legendary tuning coming out in 9.1.5. The list is pretty small, but it's gonna have a bit more of a ripple effect, very similar to the recycling system. So some of the legendary changes they've made are more quality of life changes for some of the lesser played legendaries, the ones that don't really work consistently, or the ones that provide the wrong stat for a class so they're not nearly as useful. And some of these changes could actually have some pretty big effects, like the Rogue Nightfall legendary looks insane for subtlety rogues in PvP, and the Demon Hunter legendary on a Vengeance Demon Hunter, even Havoc, has potential to actually be good since it gives you a lot of versatility, and there's even talents that can play off of that playstyle. Then there's also the legendary hidden value, and that means certain legendaries might become better because of patch 9.1.5, not because Blizzard buffed legendaries, but rather because they changed a few classes. When a class goes through changes, when their covenants go through changes, when there's some things adjusted about the playstyle, certain legendaries can simply gain value. So if you end up, let's say, playing a Death Knight in your Kyrian, and Blizzard ends up buffing the Kyrian ability so you can spread to enemies a lot easier, that means the legendary for that Covenant ability gains value, not because Blizzard had to buff the legendary, but because the Covenant ability interaction or the class interaction with that ability is now more consistent or somehow stronger, that legendary can gain natural value. And there's a lot of these hidden, unknown changes that we haven't seen so far. Potentially players experimenting with different legendaries after the class changes. So while this list might look small, it'll most likely have a ripple effect for our classes. Another big change to legendaries in 9.1.5 is how we earn them, and we earn them by doing Torghast. In Torghast, we get this currency of Soul Ash and Soul Cinders on a weekly rotation. There's a weekly cap of how much you can get, so if most of us play the game right now, we're looking at 5 to 6 to maybe even 7 weeks before we can craft our rank 6 legendaries. That is quite a long wait, especially if you want to play multiple alt characters, and that time gating can definitely feel unengaging. So Blizzard wanted to, first of all, buff the amount of that currency you get from Torghast, so Soul Ash and Soul Cinders are getting increased in 9.1.5, but also they no longer have a time-gated element. You can simply farm Soul Cinders and Soul Ash as much as you want. Which means that yes, Torghast is still going to be a bit grindy. You are still going to need to do the actual floors, the actual runs, so you'll still need to do your 5 Torghast runs in order to get the currency you need, but after those 5 runs, you're done. You don't have to wait until the next week and the week after that. You could simply just get those weeks done out of the way in an hour or so. I'm pretty sure players will eventually figure out what is the fastest way to get your Soul Ash and Soul Cinders in terms of how many runs of Torghast you need to do and just how much time you spend in there. And players will find that perfect level where it's really easy. You just run to the door boss, slay him, do that a couple times, kill the final boss, run it again. Something that is not challenging, not super difficult, doesn't take a lot of time, but allows players to still be able to get through Torghast fairly quickly, get their currency, craft the legendary, and be done with it. My alts and your alts are probably going to have a harder time, especially if you got some new ones coming up in Shadowlands. So one of the things that I think Blizzard needs to improve upon is the box of many things. As you do your Torghast runs on your main character, you earn Torghast knowledge, which you can put into the box of many things. That kind of gives you this talent style system where Torghast becomes easier. Bosses do less damage and you do more damage to bosses. You're able to get through it faster, you're able to get better powers, you're able to get different benefits like no longer having to loot mobs, which lets you kind of get through it much quicker. And I feel like box of many things needs to be applied for alt characters, because my alts and your alts are going to be coming into Torghast with no item level whatsoever. It's going to take us a bit before we can get some catch-up gear as well as get our renown. So being able to at least use the benefits of box of many things that our main has worked for our alts to get benefits from can make Torghast runs far easier, as there are some powerful benefits in there that do take a time to acquire. Another crucial update coming in 9.1.5 is the drop rates for these legendaries. All the dungeon legendaries are going to have a 100% drop rate. So for our fresh new alt characters, running dungeons on normal or heroic at level 60 will net us a guaranteed legendary once we get in the right dungeon, which will make gathering these legendaries far easier. However, this also opens up a bit of a different issue. Dungeon legendaries will be pretty easy to acquire. Legendaries from Torghast are also somewhat easy to acquire as long as you get the right hallway and twisted corridors. But the raid legendaries, which are some of the strongest legendaries for our classes and are some of the most meta legendaries currently in 9.1.5, are still locked behind Castle Nathria. This is where Blizzard really needs to consider of adding ways for us to get those legendaries from the new raid of Sanctum Domination. Castle Nathria is an old raid. In the way that Shadowlands and recent expansions for World of Warcraft play, once the new raid is out, the old raid is basically obsolete. Not as many people do it since the gear from there is not as good. Not as many people are going to run it on normal or heroic unless they maybe want transmog, and most players are not going to go back for it as transmog until the next expansion. And LFR is fairly dead. So instead of making players wait super long for Castle Nathria, if they can incorporate these legendaries into the new raid or find other ways of unlocking them, then that would be fantastic. That needs to be done because our alts are going to need legendaries, and if you're locking behind old content, it's going to be really difficult for us to get them, as the only other way to get legendaries is with Korthia. If you use this book for a bit of research, you have a chance at unlocking a random legendary. The legendary acquisition system definitely needs improvement in 9.1.5. There is an easy way to do it, but if they could just add some sort of a legendary vendor, so no matter the content we do, whether it's PvE or PvP, if there's an alternate way for us to get specific legendaries, that would also be fantastic. And this is going to be everything we have so far for legendaries in patch 9.1.5, some of the different changes that Blizzard is adding to make them easier to earn and easier to craft as well as recraft. I'm really genuinely excited about the recycling system. I'm hoping more players will be able to use this in order to try different builds and try something new. Right now, legendaries are just so punishing because if you craft the wrong one, you have to spend weeks inside a Torghast farming this currency that's locked behind time gating. And hopefully with this change, more players will be open to trying out different legendaries, especially at a higher rank, in order to see if there's a potential build hiding around the corner, because most people right now are playing it safe, sticking to logs, and trying to craft legendaries that are looking the best in Sims before trying to make something new and something interesting. So I'm hoping this will inspire more creativity going forward. And this is, I think, one of the better changes of patch 9.1.5, especially with some of the Covenant changes they're given. More player freedom, more player ability to experiment and try new things, I think is going to go a long way. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about this update in particular for patch 9.1.5. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see all of you in the next one.